Welcome to Psyche Talks.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving deep into a set of really thought-provoking ideas. They come from the audiobook of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck by Mark Manson, presented by the Institute of Professional Psychology.
That's right. It's a pretty popular one, and for good reason, I think.
Absolutely. And this is really for you, the learner, someone who wants to get to the heart of important knowledge, those key insights, without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, and hopefully have a bit of a laugh along the way. Manson's style is definitely direct.
It is. So our mission today is basically to unpack the core concepts from this work. We want to see what resonates, what helps us understand our own values, and, what really matters.
And we'll definitely explore that counterintuitive approach to happiness he talks about, the pitfalls of just constantly chasing positivity.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And the real power in choosing what to care about, and maybe even more importantly, what not to care about.
Okay, so let's start there. This problem with constant positivity, it feels like so much self-help is about fixing what's missing.
It really does. The book points out this irony, right? Like, if you're constantly looking for advice on how to be rich.
It kind of implies you feel poor already.
Exactly. Or doing endless affirmations about being beautiful because, deep down, you feel unattractive. The focus on the lack just seems to make it stronger.
And the book says truly happy people aren't doing that.
Well, the idea is they don't need to constantly affirm it. They just are. They live it. There's that Texas saying mentioned.
That smallest dog barks the loudest.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It suggests that true confidence, true contentment doesn't need to shout. It's just there.
They make sense. And we're just bombarded, aren't we? Messages everywhere telling us what we should care about.
Totally. The latest phone, the perfect vacation, looking a certain way. The audiobook argues a lot of this is driven by commercial interests, trying to get us to, well, give a fuck about buying things.
So caring too much about all that.
Yeah.
That's the trap.
It's presented that way. Giving too many fucks, as Manson puts it, about the superficial, the fake, it leads you chasing this mirage of happiness, attaching yourself to things that don't really last or satisfy.
So the key is less. Give a fuck about less.
About less, but about the right things. Focus on what's true for you, what's immediate, what's genuinely important according to your own values, not scattering your energy everywhere.
Okay. But it's easy to get caught up. The book talks about this feedback loop from hell. What's that exactly?
Yeah. That's a core concept. It's basically feeling bad about feeling bad.
Like being anxious about your anxiety.
Exactly. Or getting angry at yourself for being angry. Or worried about how much you're worrying. Guilty about feeling guilty. It's that second layer of negative emotion piled on top of the first.
And that just makes everything worse, I imagine.
It absolutely does. It amplifies the original feeling and makes it much harder to deal with. You're not just sad, you're judging yourself for being sad.
So is there a way out of this loop? How do you break it?
The book's suggestion is, again, pretty counterintuitive. It's choosing not to give a fuck about feeling bad.
Just accept it.
Sort of. Acknowledge it, yeah. Like, okay, I feel like crap right now. And then add the crucial part. But who gives a fuck? Not in a dismissive way, but refusing to add that layer of judgment. It short-circuits the loop.
I feel bad, but so what? That takes practice, I bet.
Definitely. It's not easy, but it's presented as a way to stop pouring fuel on the fire.
It sounds like a paradox.
Yeah.
And speaking of those, there's another big one mentioned. The backwards law.
Ah, yes, the backwards law. It's based on the idea, often attributed to philosopher Alan Watts, that the more you actively pursue a positive experience, the more negative the experience can become.
Wanting something good makes it bad. How does that work?
Well, think about it. The desire for more positive experience is, in itself, kind of a negative experience. It highlights what you feel you lack.
Okay, I think I see that.
And conversely, the acceptance of a negative experience,
Yeah.
that can actually be a positive experience. There's relief in just letting it be.
So the harder you chase feeling good.
The less satisfied you become. The book gives clear examples, right? Desperately wanting to be rich can make you feel poorer and more inadequate now.
Like constantly comparing.
Yeah. Or desperately wanting to be sexy or popular can make you focus on your perceived flaws and feel uglier or lonelier. The desire itself shines a spotlight on the perceived gap.
It's the wanting that causes the pain, in a way.
In a way, yes. The intensity of the pursuit creates its own kind of suffering. And sometimes caring less really does yield better results. Like not being desperate to win lets you relax and perform better.
That resonates. When the stakes feel lower, you're often more creative, more yourself. But this seems to suggest negative experiences aren't just things to endure, but maybe valuable.
Exactly. That's a major theme. The audiobook argues pretty forcefully that almost everything worthwhile in life comes through overcoming some kind of negative experience.
Like what kind of things?
Well, the obvious one is physical pain in the gym. It leads to strength and health. Failures in business, while painful, teach you invaluable lessons for next time.
Okay.
Even things like being open and vulnerable about your insecurities, which feels risky, is actually how you build genuine confidence and connection. Or having difficult, honest conversations, they build trust, even though they're uncomfortable.
Facing fears builds courage.
Precisely. So the argument is, trying to avoid all suffering is its own kind of suffering. Dodging struggle is a struggle. Denying failure is a form of failure.
Wow.
And the flip side, if you can learn not to give a fuck about the pain involved in growth, in pursuing something meaningful, you become, in the book's terms, unstoppable.
So it all comes back to choosing where to direct our energy, our fucks.
Exactly. The book frames it as having a limited budget of fucks to give. We just don't have enough energy or attention to care deeply about everything.
And we waste them on silly things sometimes, like the rude person at the store or a TV show getting canceled.
Right. Minor annoyances that drain our limited resources. Giving too many fucks about that trivial stuff means you have fewer left for the things that actually matter. Your relationships, your personal growth, the real problems you want to solve.
So the subtle art is learning how to prioritize based on your own values.
That's the essence of it. Consciously choosing where to invest your care and attention and where to consciously withhold it.
But it's important to clarify, this isn't about just becoming indifferent, right? Just shrugging everything off.
No, definitely not. The book draws a very clear line there. Not giving a fuck isn't indifference.
Okay, what's the difference then?
Indifference is often presented as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It's like a mask, maybe hiding a fear of engaging with the world, a fear of the consequences of choosing or caring. It's passive.
Whereas not giving a fuck is active.
It's active choice. It means being comfortable with being different, with saying no, with prioritizing this over that, because it aligns with your values. It's not about numbness. It's about clarity.
Because biologically, we have to care about something. We can't just switch off caring entirely.
Right. It's wired into us. So the real question isn't whether to give a fuck, but what to give a fuck about. What's truly worthy of your limited attention and energy.
The book uses that example of the elderly lady getting really upset over a tiny coupon.
Yeah, it's a stark illustration. The point isn't to judge her, but to consider that if you find yourself consistently giving so many fucks about really small, trivial things, it might signal a lack of something bigger and more meaningful in your life to dedicate that energy to.
Like if the coupon is the biggest battle you're fighting.
It might mean there aren't bigger, more important battles demanding your attention. Finding something significant to care about, something that feels important, is presented as the most productive use of your time and energy.
And this changes over time, doesn't it? What we care about.
Absolutely. Think about kids. They often give a fuck about everything. Every little thing can feel like the end of the world.
Totally. My kid stubbed his toe yesterday. You'd think it was a major amputation.
Exactly. Maturity, in the book's view, is partly about learning discernment. It's learning to reserve those fucks for things that are genuinely fuck-worthy based on your evolving values.
And as we get older, maybe energy levels drop, our identity solidifies a bit.
Yeah, and we naturally start prioritizing. We focus more on family, deep friendships, work we care about, maybe a passion project. And this selective focus, this letting go of the trivial, can actually lead to greater happiness and contentment.
This leads to a really big idea in the book, which challenges the whole pursuit of happiness itself. It frames happiness as a problem.
Right. It echoes some ancient wisdom, like the Buddha's first noble truth. Life inherently involves suffering, pain, and loss. Resisting this inevitability is where a lot of our misery comes from.
So trying to find some formula for constant happiness, like if I just get X, then I'll be happy. That's flawed.
That's the argument. Happiness isn't presented as a solvable equation. Dissatisfaction and desire are kind of built into the human operating system. They keep us moving, striving.
It's like that character the book mentions, Disappointment Panda.
Ah, yes. The superhero nobody wants but everyone needs. The one who shows up and tells you the uncomfortable truths.
Like, making more money won't necessarily make your kids love you. Ouch.
Exactly. Those harsh realities we often prefer to ignore in our quest for easy answers or constant feel-good vibes.
And there's a biological basis for this constant wanting, this dissatisfaction.
Yeah, the book touches on evolutionary psychology. Our brains are basically designed to never be fully satisfied for long. It kept our ancestors striving for food, shelter, mates. Survival depended on always wanting a bit more.
So pleasure fades quickly to keep us motivated.
That's the idea. It ensures we don't just rest on our laurels after one success. We're wired to seek the next thing.
So if dissatisfaction is normal, maybe pain isn't always the enemy either.
Definitely not. Think about physical pain. It's a vital feedback system. It tells you not to touch the hot stove or that your ankle is sprained and needs rest. It teaches limits.
And psychological pain, like rejection or failure.
The book argues it serves a similar purpose. It signals that something is out of alignment. Maybe your expectations, your values, your actions. It's information. Healthy doses of psychological pain, like the sting of constructive criticism or the disappointment of failing at something, can be incredibly valuable for learning and growth.
Look, we often try to avoid it at all costs.
We do. And the book suggests that a society or an individual overly focused on avoiding all discomfort loses the benefits of that necessary pain. Problems don't actually go away by ignoring them. They just get worse, or they morph into different, perhaps better problems as we grow.
And what about emotions in general? They feel so real, so important.
They feel important, absolutely, but the book suggests they're a bit overrated as guides for life. They're essentially feedback mechanisms.
Feedback for what?
Survival and reproduction, basically. Negative emotions are like a call to action. Something's wrong, pay attention. Positive emotions are like rewards. Good job, do that again.
But we shouldn't just blindly follow them.
The advice is to question them. Why am I feeling this anger? Is it justified? Is it helpful? Don't just accept the feeling as ultimate truth. Repressing emotions isn't the answer either, because then you lose the signal.
But over-identifying is also bad. Like, I feel it, therefore it must be true and right.
Exactly. The book compares that to the emotional reasoning of a toddler or a dog, pure reaction without reflection. And crucially, emotions don't last. Biology always wants more. That's the hedonic treadmill idea. Again, we adapt.
So if constant happiness isn't the goal, and emotions aren't perfect guides, what should we focus on?
The book boils it down to choosing your struggles. Everyone wants the reward, the great job, the amazing relationship, the fit body, but not everyone is willing to embrace the struggle required to get there.
The real question is, what pain are you willing to sustain?
Precisely. What are you willing to struggle for? Because happiness, the book argues, requires struggle. Fulfillment is earned through facing challenges, not avoiding them. It's about actively engaging with negative experiences that align with your chosen values.
Okay, but what gets in the way of doing that, besides just fear of pain?
A big one discussed is entitlement.
Entitlement. How does that fit in?
It's defined as this underlying belief that you somehow deserve to be happy and comfortable all the time without struggle. That life owes you smoothness.
So every little bump in the road feels like a personal injustice.
Yeah. Every challenge feels like a failure. Every inconvenience, a personal slight. It traps you in this very small, self-focused world that petty, skull-sized hell, the book mentions, constantly feeling like a victim.
That sounds exhausting. How do you counter that?
By shifting your metric for self-worth. The book suggests the true measure isn't how you feel during the good times, but how you handle the bad times. How do you deal with negative experiences?
And recognizing your problems aren't unique.
That's huge. Realizing that your struggles, your pain, your failures aren't some special tragic exception is presented as the first step toward actually solving them. It counters both kinds of entitlement, the I'm awesome, so I deserve special treatment kind, and the I suck, so I deserve special treatment kind. Both are self-absorbed.
It's about accepting a certain normalcy.
Yeah.
Maybe even mediocrity.
In a specific way, yes. Not giving up, but letting go of the idea that life is only worthwhile if it's constantly extraordinary or notable. The pressure to be exceptional can be paralyzing.
So accepting that most of life is kind of ordinary, that's freeing.
The argument is yes. It takes the pressure off. It allows you to appreciate simple things and focus on consistent effort rather than waiting for lightning to strike. Truly exceptional people, the book notes, often become so because they don't think they're already great. They're obsessed with improving.
That sounds like the opposite of entitlement.
Exactly. Anti-entitlement. It's about accepting the mundane parts of life, the eat your vegetables aspects, and understanding your actions probably don't matter quite as much in the grand cosmic scheme as your ego wants you to believe. That frees you up to actually do things.
This seems to require a lot of self-awareness. The book uses an onion analogy for that.
Yeah, the self-awareness onion, multiple layers. The first layer is just understanding your basic emotions. What are you feeling? Anger, sadness, joy. Surprisingly, many people struggle even here.
Just naming the feeling.
Right. Layer 2 is asking why. Why do you feel this way? This starts to uncover what you value, what you consider success or failure in a given situation.
And the third layer, the core.
That's digging into your personal values. Why does this situation represent success or failure to you? What underlying standard are you using to measure yourself and the world? This is the deepest, hardest, but most important level.
And we're often bad at answering those why questions, honestly.
Very often, according to the book, we might rationalize, blame others, or just not dig deep enough. Real progress requires that sometimes uncomfortable self-questioning.
Which brings us back to values. The book distinguishes between shitty values and good values. Can you break that down?
Sure. Shitty values, as defined in the book, tend to be things that are poor guides for life. Examples given include pleasure. It's nice, but fleeting and superficial if it's your primary goal.
What else?
Material success beyond basic needs. The link to happiness is weak. Always needing to be right that shuts down learning. Or relentless positivity, it denies reality and prevents problem solving. These are often external or based on things outside your control.
Okay, so what makes a value good then?
Good values are described as being reality-based, socially constructive, and immediate and controllable. Things like honesty, integrity, standing up for yourself, vulnerability, curiosity, compassion. They are about the process, not just the outcome.
And pleasure or success might come from living those values, but they aren't the values themselves.
Exactly. They're seen as potential byproducts, not the North Star you should navigate by.
The Dave Mustaine versus Pete Best story illustrates this really well.
It does. Mustaine kicked out of Metallica, formed Megadeth, sold millions of albums, but still felt like a failure because his value was based on being bigger than Metallica. An external, uncontrollable comparison.
Whereas Pete Best kicked out of the Beatles right before they exploded.
Initially devastating, sure. But the book suggests he eventually reprioritized. He focused on family, a stable career, things within his control. He found a different kind of success and happiness by choosing different values to measure his life by.
That's powerful. It connects to responsibility, too. The book challenges the common understanding of that Spider-Man quote.
With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, it points out we often miss the flip side. The argument made is more like, with great responsibility comes great power.
How so?
By taking responsibility for your experiences, even the ones that aren't your fault, you gain power over your internal state and your responses. Fault is about the past. Responsibility is about the present.
So something bad can happen that isn't my fault, but how I react is my responsibility.
That's the core idea. You are always responsible for how you interpret events and how you choose to respond. Choosing not to interpret is still an interpretation, often one of victimhood. Taking responsibility, even for difficult situations, is framed as empowering.
It's a choice, though. Like Yoda says, do or do not, there is no how.
Right. Changing your values, choosing what to give a fuck about, is presented as ultimately a choice. Not necessarily an easy one. It involves facing uncertainty, maybe feeling like a failure temporarily, dealing with rejection, but a choice nonetheless.
And part of making that choice involves accepting that. Well, we might be wrong about a lot.
That's a huge point later in the book. The idea that you're probably wrong about almost everything, but so is everyone else.
That sounds unsettling.
It can be. But the book uses history as an example. Think of all the things people used to be absolutely certain about that turned out to be completely wrong. We often cling to our certainties because they feel safe, even if they're limiting or causing us pain.
Like being certain you're unlovable so you avoid dating.
Exactly. That certainty protects you from potential rejection, but it also prevents growth and connection. Certainty is positioned as the enemy of growth. The goal shouldn't be to find certainty, but to cultivate doubt about your own beliefs and assumptions.
Being willing to be wrong opens the door to learning.
And changing. And recognizing that we often don't even know what constitutes a truly positive or negative experience in the long run. Something that feels terrible now might lead to incredible growth later.
Our brains aren't exactly objective recorders of reality, are they?
Not at all. The book discusses how we constantly create meaning, sometimes finding patterns where none exist. Think confirmation bias. We look for evidence that supports what we already believe.
And memory is shaky, too.
Very shaky, like the telephone game. Our memories are reconstructed, influenced by our current beliefs and values. The example of Meredith Marin's false memory of abuse is a stark illustration of how powerfully our internal world can shape our perception of the past.
So pure certainty is dangerous.
It can be. It leads to rigidity, judgment, and closes us off from other perspectives and growth. Embracing a degree of self-skepticism, questioning our assumptions, is key.
It sounds like the more you try to be certain, the more insecure you actually feel.
That's the paradox presented. Conversely, embracing uncertainty, being comfortable with not knowing, can lead to a deeper sense of calm and resilience. It removes the need to judge everything and everyone, including yourself. Uncertainty is the root of progress.
Okay, this ties into something called Manson's law of avoidance. What's that about?
The idea is simple. The more something threatens your current identity, your sense of self, the more you will actively avoid it.
Even if it's a good change.
Even if it's potentially a good change. If you see yourself as a party person, settling down might feel threatening. If you dream of being a writer but fear failure, actually writing the screenplay threatens the potential writer identity.
Hmm.
We protect our current self-concept.
So we avoid things that challenge who we think we are.
Right. Our beliefs about ourselves often take precedence. That's why the book suggests don't find yourself, never know who you are.
That sounds weird.
It means stay fluid, stay learning, don't lock yourself into a fixed identity. It keeps you humble and striving.
And this leads to the concept of killing yourself, but in the Buddhist sense.
Yeah, it's about letting go of that constructed ego, that arbitrary mental idea of who I am, realizing it's just a story you tell yourself.
And letting go of that story is freeing.
It frees you to act, to fail, to grow, without constantly worrying about protecting this fragile identity. And part of that freedom comes from accepting your problems aren't that unique. You're not special in your suffering.
So don't strive to be special, just be.
Be a student, a partner, a friend, a creator. Redefine your metrics in more mundane, actionable ways. Give up the grandiose ideas, the entitlement, the constant need for highs.
Okay, so how do we practice being less certain? Are there tools?
The book offers 3 key questions to ask yourself regularly. First, what if I'm wrong?
Just asking that question about your beliefs, assumptions, reactions.
Yeah. It fosters humility and maybe compassion for others who see things differently. Second, what would it mean if I were wrong?
Exploring the implications.
Right. What would change? What alternative values might emerge if your current certainty crumbled? And third, would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem for myself and others?
That's like a reality check for your values.
Exactly. If your truth consistently puts you at odds with everyone else and creates more problems than it solves, maybe it's time to question that truth. It's probably you versus yourself, not you versus the world.
This all points towards embracing failure as part of the process.
Absolutely. Failure is reframed as the way forward. Fear of failure often stems from those shitty values we talked about, basing self-worth on external outcomes.
But if your values are process-oriented, like honesty or curiosity,
Then failure isn't really failure in the same way, it's just feedback. Good values are ongoing processes. They can't really be completed like a goal. Growth itself generates happiness, not just hitting targets.
the book mentions Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration here too.
Yes, the idea that intense negative experiences, fear, anxiety, sadness, crisis, can actually be necessary catalysts for profound psychological growth and rebuilding your values on a stronger foundation. Don't just numb the pain, let it motivate necessary change.
It sounds like learning requires doing, messing up, experimenting.
Like pressing all the buttons on the VCR, as the book says.
Yeah.
You have to act to really understand. You can feel like you can't talk to someone, but the reality is you physically can. Action bridges that gap.
And when you choose a new value, you're essentially choosing a new kind of pain or struggle.
That's the idea. Choose your struggle. If you value honesty, you choose the discomfort of difficult conversations. If you value fitness, you choose the pain of exercise. Relish it. Act despite the discomfort. Since you don't really know anything for sure anyway, what's there to lose?
This leads to the do something principle, action before motivation.
Yeah, flipping the usual script, we often think inspiration, motivation, action. But it can work the other way. Action, inspiration, motivation.
So if you're stuck, just do anything related to the task.
Even something small, menial. Clean your desk if you need to write. Do one push-up if you want to get fit. Just do something. It builds momentum.
Like Tim Ferriss writing 200 crappy words.
Exactly. The action itself generates the next step. Failure becomes irrelevant because the standard is just acting. Use this to try on new values. Take one small step.
And choosing values also means choosing what not to value, which means saying no.
Yes. Saying no is crucial. The author's travel experience has highlighted how shallow connections can be without boundaries, without rejection. If you accept everything and everyone, you stand for nothing.
Valuing something requires rejecting what isn't that thing.
Precisely. We are defined by our rejections as much as our acceptances. Saying no creates boundaries, which are essential for healthy relationships and upholding your values. Avoiding rejection at all costs is another form of entitlement.
And trust is built on this consistency, saying no when necessary.
Trust comes from actions aligning with stated values over time. Conflict and breaches of trust happen, but repair requires acknowledging the underlying values that caused the breach and demonstrating change. Honesty, even when it involves saying or hearing no, builds real trust.
Then there's the paradox of freedom through commitment. More choices aren't always better.
The paradox of choice suggests too many options can lead to anxiety and less satisfaction. Always trying to keep all options open can mean you never fully commit to anything.
So true freedom comes from choosing.
Choosing and committing. Choosing a partner, a career path, a core value. This involves rejecting the alternatives, yes, but that commitment provides depth, meaning, and a different kind of freedom from the paralysis of infinite choice.
Finally, the book brings it all back to mortality, confronting death.
Yeah, the author shares a powerful story about a friend's near-death experience. Facing mortality has a way of stripping away the trivial and clarifying what truly matters.
Without death, life might lose meaning.
That's the perspective offered. The finitude of life is what gives our choices weight. Accepting mortality isn't about being morbid. It's about realizing the preciousness of the time we have and focusing it intentionally.
It helps you choose what to give a fuck about.
Absolutely. It encourages finding something larger than yourself to care about, contributing to something beyond your own ego. Entitlement isolates, purpose connects. True greatness isn't about fame or attention, but about making conscious choices in the face of mortality.
So the ultimate lesson from death isn't fear.
But perspective. The book concludes with the thought that, in the face of death, there is ultimately nothing to be truly afraid of in life. Remembering our mortality helps keep everything else in check.
So, as we surface from this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, we hope you, the learner, have found some surprising insights and maybe a clearer perspective on navigating all the noise out there.
Yeah, the big takeaway really isn't about apathy, is it? It's about conscious, deliberate choice. Figuring out what truly matters to you and having the courage to let go of the rest.
It's about embracing struggle as part of the deal and finding meaning, not in avoiding problems, but in choosing which problems you care enough about to solve.
Right. It's about the values you choose to live by, even when it's hard.
So maybe think about what buttons are getting pushed in your own life, what certainties might actually be holding you back, and maybe what fucks could use a little reevaluation.
And perhaps consider this. What's one small action you could take today? Just one thing. Embracing a little bit of that uncertainty to move towards a value that feels more authentic, more important to you.
A great thought to end on.
Thank you for your support and for listening.